Hello and welcome to another installment of You Can't Beat the Drums. Today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to go on a little adventure and I'm going to try to buy a drum set for 50 bucks. It's a cheap one. It's a Fender Starcaster, which was a very inexpensive beginner set, but it's 50 bucks. I'm going to go check it out and we'll see if we can get it to sound good once I get it back to the drum studio. By the way, you'll notice that I look a little different. It's vacation time. I've been on vacation, so I haven't shaved. But these days, since this is being recorded in the middle of a pandemic, it doesn't really matter because my face will be covered by a mask pretty much everywhere I go. Anyway, let's get started and just take a look at this drum set and find out, is it worth $50? Okay, here we are. It's a windy day, just arriving at the house. I shake your hand, but we're not supposed to because it's COVID. So I'm Chris. What's your name?
Gary.
Gary, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So, oh, look at that. There they are in all their glory. The Fender, Fender drums, which Fender, of course, are known for their guitars. But for about 8 or 10 years, they made the Starcasters, which were probably about 2000 to 2011 or 12, I would imagine. That's at least to my knowledge. But they look in pretty good shape. What's the story with these things?
So my son was doing middle school drums and he wanted to get a drum kit. So we went out and tried to find something that was reasonably priced because we didn't know if he really wanted to jump into it or not. So
Yeah.
we got this drum set and then he played it all the way through high school and he's graduated college and he's ready to just move on from it. And we had he replaced his cymbals to upgrade the cymbals, but never really did anything with the drums themselves.
Interesting. So this kit here, as it sits, with no cymbals or cymbal stands or anything, is going for the princely sum of 50 bucks. It does have an Evans head on the snare, looks like, and then the standard heads on the toms, although it does look like it's got one of those Remo muffler ring things in the floor tom. And then, of course, your basic single spring bass drum pedal. Now, I notice you have a couple cymbals over here. Why don't you talk about those a little bit?
We do. These are the upgraded cymbals that he had. He had a crash, or a ride, excuse me, and a crash cymbal that he had bought to go with it, and he had upgraded those to better cymbals.
Yeah, and you're selling these separately.
We are selling these separately. He also had the hi-hat to match the ZHT, and we already sold that.
Yeah, and then the bass drum pedal looks like too, or a little Tama. Yeah,
Yep.
That's a nice little pedal. And so what's the asking price of these?
So we're asking $75 for the ZHT ride, and we're asking $175 for the crash.
Right. Okay. Very good. All right. Well, let's take a close look at these. It's got sort of nice, sturdy hardware for an inexpensive drum kit. It does have, looks like little spikes on the bass drum, which is nice, and then a rather light-duty bass drum leg assembly. Has a snare stand that is double braced, again, fairly light-duty, but for the price, that's what you would expect. And then the stool, was that the stool that came with the set?
That is the stool and the pedal that came with the set.
Yeah, okay, and heads obviously aren't in very bad shape. They look pretty good, almost new, but they're probably very thin heads, and we'll have to experiment to find out whether or not other heads can make the drum sound different or better than they do stock. Well, that's good. I think what we'll do is we'll probably load them up in the car, take them back to the drum studio, and see what we can do with them. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
Okay, so here we have the drum studio with the new drum set proudly displayed in the middle. The set was 50 bucks. As I mentioned, the cymbal and the stand, he ended up throwing in for $50 more. So for $100, I got the 5 shells, the 20-inch Zildjian ride cymbal, and the PDP, or sound percussion, I think it is, cymbal stand. It's double braced. It's a very, very inexpensive cymbal stand, obviously. It is a sound percussion. But when you think about it, the sound percussion light-duty boom cymbal stand is so much better quality than even the nicer, more expensive brands back when I was young in the 70s. 60s and 70s stands were wimpy, and these stands are much more heavy-duty than anything I could have imagined way back then. Stands started getting good in the mid-70s. early 70s maybe, they started getting thicker and more heavy duty. But back in the 60s especially, the stands were so wimpy. So that stand and that cymbal for an extra 50 bucks, I think I got a pretty good deal. Now ZHT obviously is a lower end cymbal by Zildjian, but still seems to have a pretty good ride sound. What I am going to do, and this is very controversial, is I'm going to clean it. Now it's going to wipe out the Zildjian logo there and the ZHT, but the Zildjian stamp will still be on the cymbal, and it will end up looking a lot nicer. These drums are in pretty good shape. They don't seem to be too scratched up or anything. The bass drum pedal's pretty inexpensive too. Again, not a terrible pedal, but not anything to write home about. What I think I might do if I'm going to resell this is add this pearl pedal to it. The pearl pedal is a nice little pedal, a little heavier duty, and I'll probably add that pedal in. And then the hi-hat stand will be this one. This is a generic hi-hat stand, which again, not double braced, but not terrible. And the cymbals, again, lower end Zildjian. But you see, I polished them, and look how great they look. Some people will say, oh, but that makes them sound different. The dirt helps them sound better. And you know what? I had so many people complaining about muffling the drums that I would think that those people would love it if you polish a cymbal, because the dirt in a cymbal is probably going to muffle the sound slightly because it's going to inhibit the vibration of the metal. Cleaning it all out would probably give the cymbal a brighter sound, more ringy, and dare I say it, more open. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and clean the cymbal. I'll show you how I clean cymbals, because I just like cymbals that look clean, like that. So follow along as I introduce you to Barkeeper's Friend. Before I introduce you to Barkeeper's Friend, though, let me introduce you to our puppies. The dog on the right is Benji. The dog on the left, who just jumped up in the air, is Remo. Yes, Remo as in Remo Drumheads. Hi, Remo. Say hi, Remo. Yeah, that's good. Yawn into the camera. Benjamin is Benjamin Franklin Kimball, and he was named by my wife. Remo Avidas Zildjian Kimball was named by, yes, me. Okay, guys, I'm going to clean a cymbal now. Does that excite you? It should. So here we are in the laundry room with Barkeeper's Friend. This is a cleanser I like to use for cymbal cleaning, the powdered type. It also comes pre-mixed, but I prefer the powdered type because you can add as much moisture as you want as you go. By the way, I'm not growing anything illegal. These are some kind of fragrant lavender or something that my wife hangs in the laundry room to dry, and eventually she makes little bags of good smelling, I don't know, stuff you put in your clothes drawers. I don't know what she does with it, but anyway, it's nothing illegal. This is the cymbal. I'm going to see if I can get the bottom relatively clean without completely eliminating the Zildjian name. Sometimes that'll fade a little bit, but that's nice if you can leave a little bit there. If not, then that's the way it is. I'd rather have it shiny without the letters than dull with the letters. So let's get started. I use a couple of just old shop rags to begin the process. And then I use this after the fact. You put a little Griot's Garage Poly Wax on the cymbal, and it helps keep fingerprints off, or at least make the fingerprints easier to clean. By the way, you can still tell I'm on vacation because I haven't shaved for a week. That's okay. It's not like hundreds of thousands of people are going to be watching this video or anything. So let's get started by getting the rag moist. And then put a little moisture on the cymbal. Sprinkle a little bit of the old Barkeeper's Friend on there. There we are. And then we just start rubbing like this. Always go in a circular motion so you don't end up scratching the cymbal or making the lines go the wrong direction. We want to keep it nice and smooth. You can see that it starts to polish it up fairly quickly. Gets rid of the yellowishness and gives it a nice bright clean. I mean, look at the difference just in that small section I've done. You can see the difference. So you just keep adding a little bit more and off we go. See that? Now I rinse it in the sink, and we have a handy little utility sink here. I'll just rinse it with warm water. And cloth there. Okay, there we go. Dry it off. And I haven't waxed it yet, obviously, but you can see, even from just a few minutes of cleaning with that barkeeper's friend, and this cymbal wasn't even that dirty. This was a relatively clean cymbal to begin with, but you can see that's the side that has not been cleaned, and it looks okay. That's the side that has been cleaned, and it is brilliant. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the top. You'll notice the lettering is still there. It's faded a little bit, but you can still see it. So that's kind of cool. But the shininess is, you can almost blind somebody. Get this lined up with the sun. You could burn wood with it. All right, so now let's do the top. There you go, and that's before the wax. Hasn't been waxed yet. All right, so now we're going to add the poly wax. This is that Griot's poly wax I showed you before. Here it is. And we're going to use this on the bottom first, and we'll do the top. It's always important too, if you're married, to have a piece of sample carpet on the top. So this carpet sample will protect the washer and dryer, and that will keep everyone in the house happy. If you don't, you can scratch the top and get junk everywhere. So this little piece of carpet saves a lot of marriages. Anyway, you'll notice as you rub the wax into the cymbal metal and just sort of give it the old once around, which is what we will do again to help prevent any kind of scratching or whatever. This, even if you don't use the red or the black ink as the excuse, there still ends up being black all over the cloth. And that, of course, I think is the surface of the metal getting gradually removed little by little when you add this wax. I'm not sure if it actually removes it or blends with it or whatever it does that makes waxes so wonderful on paints and metals to preserve them and help prevent fingerprints and so on. But I use a microfiber cloth on the first go around to get the wax on the cymbal. Then you wait about a half an hour and then you buff it dry with a clean microfiber cloth. So I've given this thing a kind of a coat of wax now to let it dry, and you'll notice a little bit of black there. That's what happens. So I'll let this dry. I'll do the other side, let it dry, and then show you what it looks like once it's all buffed. So stand by. Okay, so now the wax has had time to dry. I'm going to use a Griot's Garage microfiber cleaning cloth, and I will begin the circular cleaning process to wipe off the wax and buff. And you'll notice that the black coming off the cymbal, again, that's the surface of the metal, I think, coming off just slightly. Either that or this thing was even more dirty than I thought. Anyway, you just keep buffing it around and around and turning the cloth over frequently to get a new fresh side of the cloth on the cymbal. And I'll kind of get the edges like this. Again, it's very handy to have that carpet there. And I'll buff the bottom side of it. And here's the finished product. Still has a little Zildjian logo on there a little bit, kind of faded, but look at the shine of that cymbal. That is gorgeous. Now let's put it back on the drum set and kind of see what it sounds like. So there is the $100 drum set. $50 for the drums and the stool and the bass drum pedal, and then Another $50 for the ride cymbal and the boom cymbal stand. Now, one of the advantages of polishing the cymbal and just leaving that light Zildjian logo there just barely readable and getting rid of the ZHT is that when you're playing a gig, most drummers will look and they may not be able to tell that you're using a cheap ZHT cymbal. They'll just think it's a Zildjian. Although I think the little hand-hammered dents will give it away. Anyway, let's hear what this drum set sounds like. I'm just going to throw up a single mic overhead just to kind of get the rough sound, run it through my little iGig box that I purchased, and I'll show you what it sounds like as is, as purchased, and then I'll see what I can do to maybe make it sound a little better. Note to self, using Comet on white heads to make them look better works pretty well on Remo heads, but with Evans heads, for some reason, the white just came right off. So it looks beautiful, but there's no roughness, so brushwork will definitely be affected. Also, these little holes let some of the water in, so I'll have to wait till that gets evaporated before I take it on any gigs. So I cleaned off the Evans, as I mentioned in the last little segment there, and I tuned it a little higher, tuned the lower head a little higher. So today, I wanted to show you what the snare drum sounds like. Now the Evans Genera dry head definitely lives up to its name. It's still very dry. The rest of the drums are open. I'm going to try after the Genera head a Remo Ambassador head and see if that makes any difference as far as how much open ringiness this snare drum actually will produce. But here's what it sounds like with the Evans head with all the white rubbed off of it and tuned a little higher. Well, I switched the head to the Remo Ambassador, and it sounds a lot more open as one would expect. And with the way the drums are tuned now, it fits more because they're all really open. I feel like if you start with a real open drum, that's better because then you can always add muffling rings or moon gels or whatever you want to deaden it a little if you want to. But these drums sound a little better higher. If they're too low, they start sounding kind of thwacky. And I've, like a wet paper bag, and I've tuned them relatively high, but I did it in 3 notes. So they're, I think, a third apart, I'm not sure. I can't remember what notes I used, but anyway, but they sound good for big band jazz. Back in the 30s and 40s, the bass drum wasn't really muffled. The drums were tuned a little higher and more open. So I'll play a little bit the way they are now, and then I might try some different heads to see if I can get a lower rock sound that sounds good. So stand by. Before I give a brief demonstration about how these drums tuned like this would fit into an old 40s or 50s big band, I did decide to add this hi-hat. Now this hi-hat is a stand I had left over from another drum set I purchased and sold with a bunch of parts. So my net cost for this thing is actually zero, even with those Zildjian cymbals. Again, it's the same lower end Zildjian cymbal as that, but again, it doesn't sound too bad. And I'm going to include this with the set when I sell it, along with a crash cymbal and stand, if I can find a crash cymbal that's decent for a low price. But for demonstration purposes now, I'll just add the hi-hat so I can keep that 2 and 4 beat going steady like Gene Krupa did back in the day. So I've now tuned the toms lower to get more of a rock sound, but these stock heads are so thin and they're just kind of got that thwacky kind of sound. Thwacky, is that a word? Thwacky, it's a new word, thwack, I just made it up. It's floppy sounding. It probably would be okay in a live situation, and I like the openness. I'm really growing to like that, because if you put the muffler rings on it, as you'll hear, it really makes all but the floor tom sound just too dead. So what I'm going to try to do next is get some muffling for the bass drum just to make it a little more muffled but still have a good tone, and then some different heads that I have laying around. I'm going to try them on these toms to see if I can get a natural open resonance that sounds good tuned to a lower pitch. So let's hear what those sound like. Now, the dreaded muffler rings. All right, after a quick trip to my local Hobby Lobby, I picked up this poly foam, 3 inches by 15 by 17, and I'm going to put that on the bottom of the bass drum and see if I can get the existing heads to sound a little bit better. So now I have put different heads on these toms, and I also put that foam in the bass drum. Now the tom heads don't match and they're not new, but it is interesting the difference in tone that it makes when you're trying to tune the toms to a lower note. Makes a huge difference. What I'll probably have to do is come up with another one of these pinstripe heads for this tom, or some just normal, I don't know, diplomat batter heads for these two. But I think I'll probably just use one of these off one of my other sets that I'm going to be exchanging anyway for the fiber skins. So I'll have 3 of these heads on this set. But here's what it sounds like. The bass drum's muffled, and I'll run it through the little iRig microphone for better quality sound. But it's muffled, but still has some ring, which I think is a good compromise. These toms sound a lot better for rock, just leaving them open like this. The pinstripes automatically have some muting, obviously, so that makes a difference. The resonant heads are just the original heads that came with the drum set. They're very thin, which is fine for a resonant head, and they're fairly tight, maybe slightly looser or as tight as the top head. Usually I like to make them about the same, or maybe a third or so down, a little bit lower. But I'll let you hear what they sound like the way they are now. So now it sounds pretty good for a rock drum set. And these little drums, even though they're cheap with good heads, can actually sound pretty good. And the cymbals are not the top of the line, as I mentioned, but they're Zildjians and they sound all right. So if I could find an inexpensive crash cymbal to put with that extra cymbal stand I've got, and get a head that maybe matches maybe another pinstripe so the toms will match, I think I could probably sell this set and make a small profit, and that would be kind of fun. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so I was able to find a Zildjian cymbal as an 18-inch crash ride, which I'll be using as a crash. Again, a low-end cymbal, but that's okay. It's still a Zildjian, sounds okay. I'm going to clean it up. This is the before picture. We'll see what it looks like when I'm done cleaning it. Well, here's the after picture. This is now the Zildjian logo, of course, has been wiped off, but it is definitely a beautiful cymbal now, and will look a lot better when I put the whole set together. I also got an extra pinstripe head off another set I've got, so all three toms will have pinstripes. All I have to do now is sell it to someone and see if I can make a little profit. In order to make the drums sound better, I think I mentioned I added new heads. Well, one of them was new. The other two, for the floor tom and the 13-inch tom, were used. You can see how used they are. And I suddenly thought, well, what if I used my Griot's Garage buffing machine, which is this thing, and I used that with some of the polishing compounds I use on my cars. Would that make the head look better? So I took the various pads and I used the Griot's machine. First I used the fast correcting cream, then I used the correcting cream after I got the harshest stuff done, and then I finished it off with a perfecting cream. And I followed all the instructions and everything, and the head actually turned out looking a lot better. I'll compare the two now, and you can see the difference. So side by side, if I can do this without dropping the camera, which I'm a drummer, I should be able to be coordinated, you can see the difference. That's the head that I buffed. Of course, it buffed the Remo logo right off the top of it, but it doesn't matter because it looks a lot better than that. So kind of interesting. It took a while. You never want to add up the time you spend fixing up drums like this because you're making less than minimum wage. But I do it because I love drums. I love doing it. Look at the difference. That's going to look a lot better. And I think that will make it easier to sell to someone, especially if they're a first-time drummer and want these things to look a little more new. Here it is in all its splendor, ready to be sold.